Hello everyone, welcome to the audio lecture on the ancient Near East. In the region of present-day Iraq and Syria and Turkey is the valley of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. This is home to the remains of the ancient region of Mesopotamia, also called the Fertile Crescent. Now this is the most volatile region on Earth in a lot of ways, but it's also the place that contains the richest concentration of artifacts in the whole world. Some of the most important sites have not even been located. Other sites have been located but not excavated. And of course, in the last years, we've lost many sites due to war. Ironically, the very abundance of artifacts in this region is the result of these years and years of conflict. Each victor goes and builds upon the ruins of the people that they have conquered. The rubble of generations of war yields a rich booty of artistic remnants. A look at these artifacts can help to serve our understanding of the region today, although some of the richest architectural sites have been destroyed. The region remains the source of much historical knowledge. Let's talk about the Fertile Crescent. It had a lot of firsts. We had the first wagon wheel, plow, irrigation, writing, the first arithmetic, the first love songs and literature, the first organized religion and schools, libraries, library catalogs, the first 7-day week, the first artisan pottery, the first beer, the first 360-degree circle, and the first astrology, and lastly, the first organized city-states. Now, there were many other firsts that happened, but that gives you an idea there was a lot going on. Now, where exactly is the Fertile Crescent? Here we have the area of Mesopotamia, and you can see there's the Arabian Desert and Persia, Asia Minor. Up above is Turkey, where you see Anatolia. Here we have the rest of the countries of the region that supported the Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, including Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, and a little bit of Syria. One of the first sites to be settled in the area was at the natural springs of Jericho. This is in the present-day West Bank in Israel. People have lived in this area for almost 12,000 years. Now, the homes typical to the period are pictured above. By about 7000 BC, the city had grown to at least 2,000 people who lived in these mud brick houses protected by a stone wall that went up to 17 feet high. Now, once you get people settling in villages, artisans are needed to support the population. So with Jericho, we have the first milling of flour, making of cloth and carpets, bricks, pottery, as well as metalwork and many of the other skills that are needed to support a city. This just arose naturally once human beings began to gather in settlements. You know, this region is also where many of the stories of the Old Testament took place. In this picture to the left, I find it so interesting. It's the pool at Gibeon. It's referred to in the Bible. This pool and spiral staircase are all carved out of solid rock. At the bottom of the pool is a passage that goes down another 50 feet to reach a hidden pool, so that the citizens of ancient Gibeon could get water even if they were under siege. Now let's talk for a moment about the ziggurat. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians built these ziggurats, which were stepped pyramids with a temple or a shrine on the top. One of the things that interests me about the ziggurats is that these structures seem to be reproduced all over the world. They have temples similar in South America, ancient shrines in India, and of course the Great Pyramids in Egypt. They all share this common theme of a sort of a pyramid-like structure that reaches up to the heavenward. So the first ziggurats were the results of rebuilding atop rubble of the sacred sites, of ancient sites. The rubble of one toppled temple would become the foundation for the next. These ziggurats also functioned as a symbol for the bridge between heaven and earth, and that analogy seems to be repeated in other cultures that used the same structures. The top part of the temple was reserved for the most holy priests, and the large area at the base served to house the business end of running the temple. These structures became the center of their communities. Now this is different than the Egyptian temples because those were built as tombs. But like Egypt, Mesopotamia was a theocracy. So instead of believing that the rulers were sent by God, the people in a theocracy believe that the rulers themselves are gods, that they are divine. And hence the people go to great lengths to support and worship the rulers. And the priests and the religious aspect has much control over all of the other state functions. Now this is something that really interests me. If you couldn't find the time to go to church, to go to the temple in ancient Mesopotamia, you could just have a votive figure stand in for you. So that's what we see pictured below. And their carvings, some of them are gods and some of them are effigies of humans. And a person could purchase one of these and have them go to the temple in place of being there in person. The religion in this part of the world was polytheistic, which means that the people worshipped a pantheon of many gods and goddesses. These gods and goddesses had power over human actions and forces of nature. Each city had its own protective deity, and each god had its specific attributes. Now, one thing I want you to notice in this picture to the left is the emphasis on the eyes. The eyes mean that the human beings can see rationally, to see a larger way of viewing the world than animals do. Emphasis on eyes such as this is common in the art of many cultures throughout the world. Here is the bronze head, which dates from about 2000 BC. This is one of the few remaining artifacts of the Akkadian people. This was a powerful culture that settled around the area of Baghdad. This sculpture was actually stolen from the Baghdad Museum after the fall of Saddam Hussein. Currently, its whereabouts are unknown. Now, the theft of art in wartime is a tragedy, and yet it is as timeless as the creation of artwork itself. Sometimes treasures are stolen in order to protect them, but more often they're probably stolen for profit and for the betterment of the person who does the stealing. But people have always stolen treasures during times of war. We can only hope that it remains intact somewhere and will resurface. The image below is from the Assyrian people, and you can see here the great sophistication of the artwork. It's a low relief showing the death of a panther or a lion. So let's talk about King Gudea. The Akkadians eventually fell to a mountainous people from the north, who then ruled for about 60 years. During that time, the region was ruled by a king named Gudea, and he rebuilt and restored many temples near the ancient city of Lagash in modern-day Iraq. Gudea made many votive statues of himself to be placed in the temples. About 20 of them are still existing. These statues are carved from a stone called diorite, and it's very hard. It's the same stone that the Egyptians used, but in the case of this king, it had to be imported over great distances. And because the stone is so hard, it was very difficult to work. But also, this meant that the sculptures are very durable, which is why so many of them remain. All the statues are similar. Like this one, they include images of water and fish. Some of them actually had working fountains. I like the inscription that's on the base of this one, dedicating this statue to the temple, the sculptor, and all who view it, to the divine poet and interpreter of dreams. So that everyone who views it would see the divine poet and interpreter of dreams. That's kind of a nice thought. All right, now here's a beautiful harp, a lyre. This harp, dating back from 2685 BC, was discovered in the tomb of a queen. The instrument was intended to make music, to accompany her passage to the other world. On the right we have the harp, made of wood, gold, lapis lazuli, and shell. At left is a close-up of the end panel, which I find really fascinating. So look closely if you can see at what's depicted in these panels. The first one, we have a hunter embracing two stags. Then, of course, the wolf carrying dinner, followed by a lion. And then this panel, which is enlarged below, and it shows a donkey playing the harp, accompanied by other animals. Now this one is interesting because it appears also in medieval literature. At the bottom is a standard scorpion man, the usual, with a scroll followed by a goat with goblets. So it's interesting to me that this image appears also in the medieval artwork. And some of this stuff is it's like surrealism. It's like modern surrealism. And somehow it must also tell a story. Now what about Babylon? Welcome to Babylon. This famous city was built around 600 BC by King Nebuchadnezzar. It was on the Euphrates River in Iraq. In this reconstruction drawing, the Babylon ziggurat, also known as the Tower of Babel, and the visible is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, but we don't really know where it was. This is an artist's rendering. To enter Babylon, one would have to pass through the Ishtar gates, which are pictured here to the left. The road that passed through them was called, "May the enemy not have victory." Now, ironically enough, these gates are now in the Berlin Museum. They were stolen by the Germans as war booty, but that has actually helped them to be preserved when you consider that they were in Iraq before that. So therein lies a conundrum. Is it better to remove them in order to preserve them, or is it better to leave them there? Here we have the great guardian figures at the gate of the citadel of Sargon II from the ancient site of Ur. And this was actually during its excavation. To get a feeling of the size of these, look at this guy right here. Can you imagine what that would have been like to uncover these great works of art? So lastly, let's talk about the ancient civilization of Persia. The Persian Empire was a massive empire that at its height it stretched from Africa to India and traded really throughout the known world. This is the ancient city of Susa that was changed to Persepolis when Alexander the Great conquered it. But this was the seat of power for the massive Persian Empire, much as Rome was the center of the Roman Empire. This city was built by the powerful King Darius, who used artisans and materials from all over the empire, including Greece and Egypt. Susa was built on a 40-foot platform, accessible by only one set of stairs. Now that's how they stayed. That was one of their means of protection, really. Now the stairs are interesting to me because they were designed so that a horse could climb them. Ancient rulers often built these massive complexes as symbols of their power, and in some ways people still do that to this day. It seems to be one aspect of the human condition. This Persian Empire under Darius III did fall to Alexander the Great in 334 BC, and he's the one who changed the city to the Greek name of Persepolis, and then went on to burn the palace. So this is the final slide of the audio lecture. Thanks for listening.